You were not meant to be a slave to the grind. You were not meant to trade your life force for money. You can escape gravity. You can unlock your life. You got this. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to Unlock Your Life. I'm your host, Jennings Smith. Guys, today I have an awesome guest in the studio with me, Mr. Pejman Ghadimi. I know Pejman because I actually bought the Ferrari from him. I bought the Lamborghini from him. He sold the Ferrari for me. He sold the Lamborghini for me. This is how I got connected with him. He posted on Twitter a couple weeks back that he was looking to be on podcasts, and I pounced at the chance because he has a super interesting story. I wanted to share it with you. He's an author of 3 books, Third Circle Theory, Radius, and Gated Choice, which are all about human consciousness, why people do the things they do. He owns a ton of businesses, commercial real estate, a lending company, exotic cars, watches. So Pejman, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you having me on, buddy. I know I have a very long bio, so it's impossible to figure out what I actually do. Most people can't figure out what I do. My own parents can't figure out what I do.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I know you were an immigrant, weren't born in America. Can you tell me about some of that, the struggle coming up and how you got over here and what led you to that?
Yeah, so I basically left Iran when I was a little boy based on the revolution. And so we were pretty well off in Iran, but unfortunately the revolution happened and my mom had to flee the country. So we basically lost everything. It was just me and my mom, single mom. We left Iran, ended up in France. In France, she took 10 years plus to basically build a small business just to keep us afloat, and then finally had a chance to come to America. So I went from super rich as a child that I never really got to experience as an adult, and then went to poverty ever since I was basically 3 years old, all the way till I was about 16, 17 years old. So when I finally came to America, I ended up in LA for a couple of years, and at which point I didn't have a green card or anything, and then ended up with some family members who also lost their jobs constantly. So it was like, hey, we're going to be okay. We're not going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're not going to be okay. And then ended up in Virginia where I was about 14, 15 years old, and I got tired and started looking for ways to make money without a green card. So I became a telemarketer very young, made a lot of really good money, became director of that company by 18, became one of the youngest bank managers in the United States at 18. Then I was a VP for a bank by 23. I was head of an airport banking division that I created by 24. Fired by 25 of a very comfortable, very, very comfortable 6-figure job with a 7-figure bonus. And then started the entrepreneur journey, or should I say started the small business ownership journey first, and then leading to the entrepreneur journey. Today, I'm very well known on the internet for exotic car hacks, watch trading academy, and basically teaching alternative assets to people. As a guy with a background in banking, investments, and just understanding cars, watches, and art, I've put together online courses for the last decade, teaching others basically how to do that in our communities. The same community you found that got you your Lamborghini and Ferrari are basically the same communities that I'm very well known for online. And then, of course, I've authored a lot of books on human consciousness, as you said, Third Circle Theory, Radius, and Gated Choice, and own a multitude of businesses and commercial assets as well. So lots of different things. I mean, wherever you want to go with it, I'm happy to tell you about it.
I want to start with personal experience because I think my audience would be interested. You know, they know I had some cars, and something that really caught my attention looking at you on Facebook, and this was you were basically viewing an exotic car as somewhat of an investment, or at least something that, you know, you could break even on or maybe lose a little bit. But because in my mind, my limiting belief was, oh, well, you got to be able to blow a couple $100,000 to be able to get one of these cars. And why would I do that? I mean, yes, I'm doing well, but I don't want to lose $200,000 or $300,000. And in your course, I think I bought the course and I learned how to do this stuff, but you had a turnkey package where you would source the car for them. And I'm not really a car guy. I didn't know the ins and outs. I thought, why don't I just hire this expert to source a car for me? And yeah, I ended up getting a Ferrari 458 Italia. Was white. I actually saw it on Hunter's website recently. I think he was reselling it again, but I think I paid $235 for that car, and then you sold it for me 18 months later, I think for $245 or $248. And so it did, in fact, work because you said, hey, you need to get this model. This is the last naturally aspirated Ferrari. This is the color combo that people like. It's got the carbon fiber. It's the Spider. You don't want to get the cheapest Ferrari you can get. this one, spend a little bit more, but you're going to do well with that. And so I think that a lot of people that are, it's still an expense, right? And you've got to take that into account of, hey, you could blow a clutch or brakes, and if you're going to finance it, you've got the debt payment. Can you handle all that? But it's not a situation of walking in and losing $100,000, which I think you can if you go into this field without knowing what you're doing, right? So,
I mean, isn't that the case with anything? I mean, think about real estate. That's something that your audience knows well, right? Like, so think about it. Like, you can lose $100,000 in real estate pretty fast if you don't know what you're doing and you just buy anything for any reason at any price. The argument is cars are an asset class like watches, art, handbags, and things of value. And the argument of the asset class or how effective the asset class is based on the pool of people and the institution supporting it. So the reason real estate is such a good and well-known asset class is because a lot of people need homes, right? So it's a need that's turned into an asset class. So because there is never enough supply, there are times where there's more supply than demand for that moment as we look at markets. But generally speaking, there's an ever-growing population and there aren't enough homes for every single person to own a home. So what ends up happening is it's always an in-demand asset class. People always are going to need homes. And so regardless that they're going to rent that home or live in it or buy it or own it or invest in it, they're always going to need homes. So that's why real estate is that asset class. Now, when you look at cars, it's really the same thing in a way, except that over the last over the last 2 decades, human nature and the industry has changed dramatically. So we know that people keep getting richer over time. So we know that people that are richer want to buy things with their money. That's a normal process. You get rich so you have more comfort. You buy stuff. Doesn't matter what that is. You travel more. You buy nice cars. You buy nice watches. You buy stuff you want, right? Nicer homes, etc. So there is a need that turns into a want. And the richer people get over time, then the more wants become dominant over needs, right? When you have excess money, you go after your wants, not your needs. So we know that as long as we look historically, there are more people that are getting richer each year for the last 20 years. There's never a time where you can say there are now less millionaires than there were back then. It's always more, right? True. So there are always richer people because there's more money. There's more ways to make money in the world. And as long as people want to make money and as long as money is still the driving equilibrium for success in society, then people will want things. And so cars have risen out of that need basis into the want basis because there are 2 classes of cars. There are cars you buy that are liabilities that are basically perishable cars. They're made by robots in factories like Kias, Nissans, etc. And they're adding certain elements of comfort for people. Oh, you got some leather seats, a little DVD player, whatever the fuck you need in your car. And so those cars are perishable and lost, basically liabilities. And that's what people are used to in the world because that's what cars were, a means of transportation. But as the world is getting richer, manufacturers are making more cars driven not in getting people from point A to point B, but rather looking at driving as a sport. Motorsports is growing across the last 10 years, meaning more races, F1's becoming more popular. People understand racing is a real thing. Secondly, performance cars are becoming more popular. People are like, I want faster cars, nicer cars. Cars are becoming a status symbol. There's hundreds of reasons why people are now looking at spending more for wants rather than just, I have a need to get from point A to point B, unless they're poor, which is okay, right? I was poor at some point. You can come out of it and eventually chase your wants. But the argument here is that because that has occurred, people's mindset of how they looked at cars 20 years ago, which was like, hey, I'm buying perishable things and all these crazy race cars or sports cars aren't worth it, they're constantly breaking down, hasn't evolved as much as the industry itself has evolved. So people don't really realize that this is an asset class. There's a full set of institutions. Look around you. How many dealerships are in your town? BMW, Ferrari, Lamborghini. Look 20 years ago, there was 3 Ferrari dealers within like the East Coast, 5 Ferrari dealers on the West Coast, and that was it. Now you have 3 to 5 Ferrari dealers per state. It's crazy, based on where they are, because that's how much the demand has increased for wants, not needs. And as that demand has increased, as these institutions have increased, as the volume of transactions has increased, then manufacturers now make 10 times more cars based on wants than they used to in the past and are more focused on that market than they are on needs. So while the volume of needs-based cars is out there, those are still diminishing, perishable, and liabilities that are going down in value. However, on the wants market, there are two specific categories. One that is just a generic want, like here's a Lamborghini or a Range Rover or something of luxury. Or there is the ultra demand, which is like, here is a status item that basically differentiates you from everybody else. And those are the cars we basically call exclusive exotic cars. And they're always in such short supply and have such an increase in demand that basically everybody wants to stand out. Nobody can get the asset they need to stand out. And so people will basically pay more for an item that is rare. That's just common human nature. Like if you only have 3 items and you have 10 people that want it, then the price is driven by what people are willing to pay, right? Not based on what a fair market value is, but who is actually trying to buy the asset, how much money do they have, and are they going to outbid each other? And so this is the same for a great home in a location where there's maybe one home. There's 3 rich guys that really want that house, and it's the only house in the neighborhood, and there's no other house coming up the next 5 years. So the argument is that house is going to be bid up, and you could say it's going for significantly above market value of what is considered equilibrium value based on all the other properties in the area. But that's kind of like how exotics work, because they're based on a want. People will usually spend more on their wants. And so if you can figure out the models, the cars, the makes that people are going to go after, and the depreciation schedule they've already taken versus they're going to take or they're never going to take, then you can actually decide which cars to buy to beat what we consider market values and ultimately be able to do what I did for you, which is buy a car for X amount, drive it for 2 years, and it's still even more in demand then. So people will pay even more despite the fact that it has more miles. And to answer your question, like when you talk about, oh, well, yes, there are costs of carry to some extent. I mean, yes, there's a payment to carry, but the payment is not a loss. It's just parking money into the car because it's equity versus, like, people understand that your payment for your house is not all going to interest. The majority is, but there's still an equity play in what you're paying towards the house. And the other part of it is that most people misconstrued cars as, oh, they constantly break down. There's also a high cost of insurance. And they don't realize that the entire industry has gone around that, meaning like State Farm, the major insurance carriers, they have programs specifically for exotic cars, knowing that this is a big part of their business now. And these programs are not like scared tactics that are like, oh my God, you have a Ferrari, so that's going to cost an arm and a fortune. They just go, okay, it's an extra $60 a month for your Ferrari versus your Honda. Most people would think that's impossible. Why would a Ferrari cost the same as a Honda? But they just don't understand how insurance has evolved over time. And then cars don't break down because today, most manufacturers basically interchange parts, something that didn't happen back then. Back then, Lamborghini used to create maybe 10 cars a year. Now they're creating 100 cars a week. So the difference is the parts have much more testing, have much more history behind them, and are usually owned by a larger company like Audi or Volkswagen that basically supplies these parts and uses them between Audis and Lamborghinis, making them more durable because they're making 100,000 parts and they're not just testing 10 of them on 10 cars, hoping they uphold. So much rarer to find catastrophic failure on cars, much rarer to find catastrophic costs on insurance, and things that yet a lot of people not in that space have very little knowledge about. That's kind of the reason we created Exotic Car Hacks, to educate people on the idea of how it works.
I mean, if you think about the average person's experience is they buy a car, minivan or a Honda or whatever, they drive it for 5 years and they buy it for 30,000, they sell it for 10, right? They see the depreciation because that's the perishable asset that they're just using up and selling. It's saying like the want versus the need. It's like, well, I need to know what time it is. Okay, go buy a $10 Casio. Where I want a Rolex because of, what that's going to tell to my community. Okay, this guy's of means, maybe he's got deals, whatever reason people buy the Rolex. It was an accomplishment, it was a reward, what have you. And that was where seeing the Ferrari and the Lamborghini as, okay, this is not a perishable asset. And obviously I'm not putting 15,000 miles a year on it. And to be fair, I mean, I didn't have any major mechanical issues with any of my cars.
Exactly.
They were very well built.
Because they're pretty safe and they're pretty normal, like a normal car. Like they don't break down.
Especially the Lamborghini. I thought that was a very well built car.
It's an Audi product, man. It doesn't break down. Like if your Audi A4 doesn't break down, your Lambo won't break down. Basically, it has the same chance of breaking down.
But I want to dig into the needs market versus the wants market, right? Because the need is there. Like people need workforce housing. They need an apartment. They need a house. They need a car, a minivan, whatever, utilitarian vehicle. The want seems like a much more volatile market, right? When things are good, the prices go crazy. When things are not so good, people retract and pull back. I mean, do you see more volatility? Because I know that the luxury watch market.
We don't, because the volume is significantly smaller. So yes, there are times, for example, like the COVID era, right? This was an era where volatility was high because people were stuck at home. They had additional income, not from checks, but from PPP loans that gave them the opportunity to basically keep their personal money while putting government money in their business. This gave them freedom to spend their personal money. So there was a significant increase in demand over a period of time that was unprecedented. The argument a lot of people make is like, well, it's easy to talk about if you bought a car during COVID. But I usually tell people, I'm like, I've been doing this since like 2005. This isn't like, oh, this is a 2020 kind of program. No, I've been doing this since 2005. I've been teaching this online since 2009. So plenty of people were doing this, like in 2009 all the way to 2020. And yes, they were in a position to take even more advantage of the market in 2020 when the car and watch prices started going to the roof. But let's come back here to something you said. You talked about the needs versus wants market for a second, and you talked about the watches, right? Like wearing a Rolex is a statement piece, like driving Lamborghini. It is, but it's much more than that. It's a qualifier in the space. So think about it the same way as you guys talk real estate. So I use real estate as examples here. Why do people want to live in a more affluent neighborhood? Why do people want to live in the better neighborhoods? Because they have better neighbors, better school districts, higher quality of life, right? That's generally like in their mind when they're buying a home. They go, if they have kids, they go, what school districts are around here? What will my kid qualify for? Is that the best school? Or they'll say, well, what are my neighbors? Do I have ghetto neighbors? Do I have really rich neighbors? Am I pushing my kids to see what's possible in life? Or am I just, my neighbors might do drug deals? Like what is really important? Safety and all these things come to mind for a regular family buying a home, right? And the more you get up there, typically you'll see more disparity where really rich neighborhoods don't have ghetto neighbors, right? You don't have a crappy house in a very upscale neighborhood. Usually all that stuff is tear down and really nice stuff gets built. There's a reason for that. And the same reason happens with watches and cars. It's a qualifier. I wear a $500,000 watch because it gets me in the door. And it's a silent way that people that know, right, will automatically look and say, hey, that guy, like if he's telling me, like we're talking business and we're talking about a $200K deal, they're not worried if I'm going to come true or if I can or not. I'm a serious player because I'm wearing a $500,000 watch. We're not having $200K conversations. We're having $500,000, $10 million, $100 million conversations. And these conversations are not out of context for me. However, someone pulls up and doesn't have that qualifier. Well, they have to qualify themselves in different ways. You almost have to wear your resume on your sleeve, right? You have to be like, well, I built this company and I drive a Camry and wear a Seiko, and that's fine. Like if that's your style of living, but it doesn't change the fact that the general public really is not going to include you in these conversations unless they personally know you. So they are incredible networking tools. And, when I was in banking, all of my colleagues and bosses used to tell me, you don't need to drive a Lamborghini, because I drove a Lamborghini when I was in corporate America. And they were like, why do you drive a Lamborghini? It sets a wrong precedence. Why do you wear a $20,000 watch? We're a bank. We don't want people to know we're rich. And I'm like, we are a money place that invests people's money to make money. Who do you want investing your money? A guy that makes $12 an hour working at the bank that doesn't know anything, or a guy that's personally successful and has made millions of dollars of his own money and seems to know what he's doing? Who do you want in your circle? You want the best of the best, or you want people who are weak and have never done anything and have never had success doing it and are going to be your slave? And this is the biggest misconception in sales and also in the opportunity of like how the world works. You can come at the world from a servicing standpoint, which is I sell a service and I'm here to service you, sir. Like, let me provide you service. Or you can come from a place that I've used for 20 years and I've built hundreds of millions of dollars of businesses out of it, from a place of advisory, from experience and expertise. And if you're an expert at something and you become an advisor instead of a servant to someone, you no longer have to worry about service because people are buying your expertise. You just said at the beginning of this, I came to you, let the expert do the job, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the key. When you sell expertise, you sell track record, that has to match the level of success you've had. Would you have come to me should I have been driving a Honda telling you to buy a Ferrari? No, you come to a guy driving a Bugatti because you say, hey, this guy's got a $25 million car collection. It's probably, he probably knows what he's talking about when it comes to buying a Ferrari, which is a $200,000 car. It's not a big deal. And this is subconsciously what you do, even if you don't think that way. Yeah, your mind thinks that way. And so if we come at the world from a place of expertise, we command a premium for any service at any time, and we have less convincing the world to do that we are that. When we come from that place, we also have to fit in the circle of that place, In other words, you can't fit in and advise people on buying Ferraris while driving a Honda. You can advise them down. You can't advise them up. I can't advise a billionaire on how to invest his money. I could serve him, but I can't advise him. But I can advise basically anybody who's got less than $200 million on what I've done in my life to basically live the way I live, do the things I do, and come from a place of experience. And if they have $2 million, $5 million, they're like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to what this guy's saying because he's basically the image of what I want to get to down the road, right? And these are the key ingredients to basically ensuring that you have continuity without having to constantly build around repeating yourself over and over and over. So a lot of people don't understand that these things are a place to park legitimate money, but they're also a place, very importantly, to actually create a minimum qualifier to get in the room, sit at a table, and find other people with common interest. I mean, you have a Ferrari, you meet other guys with Ferraris. You think they're all losers, or you think they have businesses? Are they the best at what they do? Probably some of them are, some of them may not be. But the majority are going to be people that are interesting in doing things, following their passions, following their purpose, and as a result, found some level of success. And you're going to talk to successful people instead of average people who are afraid of everything,
Yeah, I mean, and that credibility piece is huge in real estate. I mean, we're selling our property in Tulsa, Oklahoma for like $12.6 million. And when we get the offer in, the first thing we're looking at is anybody can type a piece of paper saying they're going to pay us $12.6 million. Yeah. Who's the group? What have they done? What does their portfolio look like? Have they gotten agency debt before? Yeah. What kind of down payment, earnest money, are putting their money where their mouth is? Okay, they're putting $250,000 down. Within 30 days, that money will be hard and non-refundable. They have the ability to execute on this because I don't want to go under contract for 3 to 6 months with a guy that's going to flake out on me, right? And not close the deal. And so, I mean, I definitely agree with you on that. But what would you say to people that are, maybe they're reaching, right? They, you see a lot of this on Facebook and Instagram and gurus who are, they're flashing the watches and the cars, but they really are maybe faking it till they make it. What would you say about that?
So there are so many cartoon characters on Instagram or on the internet generally. I call them cartoon characters because they're all full of shit. I saw a guy recently buy a Bugatti, right, from this leasing company where he had to put $200K down, was paying $30K a month, only to return it after 2 months, but created 2 years of content out of it in those couple of months. Pretending he's still posting on Instagram as if he owns the car. It's like cartoon character, like Forex traders. And these guys are imbeciles. They shouldn't be in those cars. But here's reality. Money knows money, right? So there's a difference between I have some temporary money and I have done the core things necessary to basically be in a position of wealth, right? So does it matter that someone has a Ferrari up front? No, that's fine. If they're big, passionate car guys, they want to buy a Ferrari and they're putting a lot of their monthly money into a Ferrari, that's fine too. What you get good at over time is you become a good reflection of yourself and onto others. Meaning, I know what it took for me to build a $25 million car collection and what it took for me to buy my first $2 million Bugatti 10 years ago, $3.5 million Bugatti today. I know the dollar it takes to do that. I meet plenty of people, and I can tell you in 2 seconds who's real and who's not, just based on talking to them about how they bought their car, who they bought it from, et cetera. So it's so easy to tell because the stories don't add up. And I know what it is because I came from a place of experience. I've done it, right? And if I hadn't done it, I would be easier fooled than not. And this is one of the key things that I always tell people at Exotic Car Hacks and Watch Trading Academy. Once you take training around how cars work, you no longer get impressed by the baseline of how money works through these cars. So let me give you an example. Most of us would see, if we're not trained, would see a car that has a Lamborghini logo and assume that's a very expensive car. But today you can buy a Lamborghini for $60,000 all the way up to $2 million, So the argument is there a difference in the models? Of course there is, right? Like, is there a difference in what a person drives? Is there a difference in how many miles does it have? What year is it? Most people are impressed by Lamborghini. I love when kids are older, they're like 15 years old, they see Lamborghini and they run after it to take photos, and their mom drives a more expensive Range Rover. And I find that really funny because I'm like, what are you chasing that car for? Because like, that's the Lamborghini. I'm like, your mom's truck is like 2 times the price of the Lamborghini. What the hell are you chasing that car for? And they're like, it is? I'm like, yeah, that Range Rover is like 250 grand and that Lamborghini is like 65,000 and some guy trying to show off. But if we trained people on money, if we trained them on how to read money, if they understood what things cost because they weren't confused, then they would look at success very differently, right? You wouldn't be impressed in a Maserati if you knew it was a $600 a month payment. Would you ask that guy for mentorship? Like, dude, mentor me. How'd you get a Maserati? Oh, I pay $600 a month. Wait, what? I'm not going to ask you for business tips or how to make money online, right? It doesn't make any sense. So, but we don't know that. We're not trained for it.
Yeah, after going through your course, I think I had got the Ferrari. I saw a Ferrari California, and it was like pretty old, beat up, a lot of miles, and like I know
that's a poverty car, like
that's not the Ferrari California is not the top end of the market.
It's a $600 a month car, and like if someone else looks at that untrained, you take the course, you're like, okay, that doesn't faze me. I don't have to look at that twice. But someone else would look at that and be like, wow, that guy must have it made. He must be so successful, so much money. What does he do for a living? But really no correlation. So when you talk about these kids or these clowns on the internet, most people who haven't taken my course will fall for these things, not knowing how to read money, not knowing what things cost.
Right. So I want to shift into some of the, human consciousness stuff that we talked about in the books that you read. You said you could read people, you could see what they're afraid of, and you mentioned fear as something that holds people back. Can we dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, so every human being is built into an evolutionary tract. And so I've basically written through my books a roadmap to how a human goes from birth to fully conscious to having an entire life cycle as a fulfilled life cycle. And the 3 stages are awareness, self-awareness, and consciousness. Now, these are the stages a human is supposed to go through. Doesn't mean most people will. Some people get stuck in the first circle and never gain a full sense of awareness. Others never, I would say the majority of the world never gains a full sense of self-awareness, and less than 2 to 3% of the world ever becomes conscious. We've done such a bad job as human beings to basically blur the lines between all things. We think awareness and self-awareness are the same thing. We call aware people conscious people. We call people that pay attention, individuals who are conscious, which isn't true. We call spiritual people conscious people. Like, we have done such a bad job as a society at integrating our own evolution spiritually that we basically fallen victim to all these wrong definitions of how things work. And as a result have become stuck and imprisoned by these definitions and believe we're moving forward when we're really not. And so, one of the things that I try to do in my books is decipher for people how to reinvent their language. So allowing them to redefine how to progress instead of basically being stuck to the societal norms and conditioning. For example, like we talk about jobs not being like society has taught us that you can't get rich making other people rich. You've heard those lines all over Instagram, like, why would you wake up to build someone else's dream? Tell me one person who has a job who literally is waking up because they want to build someone else's dream and they're not going to work because they need money. Doesn't exist, meaning like no one is doing anything for anyone as a favor. Like people are waking up and either going to their job because they need money or they don't know how to make money otherwise. They're not going to their work because they love the owner of McDonald's so much that they're like, dude, I want to help you make this McDonald's the best McDonald's and I want nothing in return. I don't care. I'm just such a believer in what you're doing and it's free. I'm going to show up and make burgers for you for free. No, everyone is pursuing their own dreams and everyone is pursuing their own evolutionary track. They just like the comfort of falling back on victimhood, which is the idea that, they're stuck in that job, not the fact that the job is supposed to teach them skill. They're supposed to advance through it and carry on. And this is the same thing that basically happens where people get stuck. They avoid getting jobs because they're like, I don't want to be told what to do for the next 30 years of my life. Who has ever worked a job for 30 years? Like less than 1% of the population. Like the majority of people switch jobs every 5 years. Why would you think that you're stuck in a job for 30 years. Like, where does that mindset come from? Why is that imprisoned mentality? Like, before you even start a job or understand what it is, assume that you're going to be stuck there for 30 years. So the norm of how the world has basically perceived evolution has become so lost that people get stuck. And they just, as a result, they make a lot of really poor decisions. I've talked to kids that are like, I want to be an entrepreneur and I refuse to get a job. And I'm like, cool. What do you want to do? Like, what business do you want to build? I don't know. Then why don't you have a job? If you don't have skills, if you don't know what you want to do, why aren't you making money with your time? Why aren't you trading your time for money? Isn't that better than sitting around hoping you'll figure out what to do by staring at a mirror? Oh, well, I don't want to be stuck there 30 years. Why is it one or the other? Why is it I'm stuck there 30 years or I have to figure out what I want to do tomorrow morning? Why can't you get a job, learn some skills, and 6 months later transition once you figure out what you want to do? Or why don't you put some money aside so you're ready to start your business in 2 years? Again, we think in absolutes, and we do the same thing in politics, right? We think everything right or left. We don't really think about, I don't have to identify as one or the other. I can have positions of both. I can agree to both. And there's a lot of times where, as a society, that's how we tend to think, in the extremes of either side of the equation. And we either are team this or team that. We're not like a normal, balanced human. And so my books help reestablish that for people. And as a result, help them kind of realize that, for example, like you talked about fear is normal. It's not a question of, are you going to be afraid or not? Everyone's afraid. The argument is, can you overcome that? Do you realize when you're afraid, and do you realize how to get ahead when you are afraid? Instead of like, I'm afraid, I don't know what to do, I'm just going to freeze now.
I was a contractor for 15 years building homes. It was my own small business, and I didn't super enjoy it, right? You talk about I wasn't there to build somebody's dream home and make them happy. I mean, I wanted to do that as a byproduct, but I really wanted to make money and support my family, pay my bills.
But it was your goal, your dream,
Right. But I got stuck in, this is the only thing I know how to do. This is the only way that people will pay me money. And I probably stayed in that industry a little longer than I should have. But when I faced that and recognized, hold on a second, the world is big. There's a lot of ways I can do this. And moving into real estate, what I didn't understand at the time was all those skills that I had built by running that business and grinding it out for 15 years of, how do I get people to believe in my company? How do I get people to hire me? How do I keep my promises? How do I have difficult conversations with subs and withholding payment until the job is fully done, and firing employees and hiring employees and all these things? I mean, they translated right into something, and I just got into a better vehicle. I evolved my vehicle, but those skills, they aren't there in the 16, 17, 18-year-old. I mean, unless, you got
to build them somewhere, right? And you build them through experience. And that's the key. You build them through experience. So a lot of times the goal is to take that experience and not look at it laterally. Meaning, when I was in banking, fine, I had customer service experience, I had sales experience, I had management experience, but I had to look back and say, what am I really good at? So when I left my banking job, I said, I'm really good at building teams. I'm not limited to building teams in banking. I can build teams in anything. So I started building teams in tech, and people were like, you don't know anything about tech. I'm like, I didn't know anything about banking when I started. It doesn't fucking matter. Someone else is going to know more than me. Let's put him on the team, and let's get the right quality people together, and let's build out a team to get what I need done. And that's exactly what I did. So I stopped focusing so much on this idea that I had to do the same thing I was doing, and otherwise the skills would go to waste. And I mean, we subconsciously do this. Look at how many people get a college degree but find a job completely unrelated. And they're like, I love this. I don't even care for well, why would you give up 5 years of college degree experience, right? To go do something completely different? Because you thought you wanted to go in a direction and new direction came in. Doesn't mean that nothing that you learned in school is applicable. It just means that a lot of these things that you learned in school aren't exactly applicable on a one-to-one basis. But it doesn't mean at some point in your life they won't also come handy, or they may not, right? But the argument is that you're not stuck in that career for 50 years just because you took a school degree. You don't have to go that way. And a lot of times people get stuck in this idea that, they say you have to pursue your passion. You have to chase the things you love. And, you don't have to do that. I didn't love my jobs. I didn't love the way I made money for the first 10 years of my life, but I made a ton of it because I was really good at it. And it wasn't that I loved doing it. I loved waking up in the morning. It was fulfilling. No, you don't have to start your life at the end goal. The end goal is to find a fulfilling purpose. the first 10 years, 15 years of practice, it doesn't have to be a fulfilling purpose, you know?
Yeah. I've even seen the evolution with me as real estate. I mean, built up a portfolio of 1,400 units, doing a whole lot of management and asset management. And that's kind of evolved more onto just the capital side, right? It's like, okay, I can raise capital, I can loan money, I can invest with other partners who are the operators on those deals. And that way I can continue to grow instead of, do I really want to build a gigantic management company and have 10,000 units that I'm personally overseeing? Not really. That's not my passion. That's not my vision. And so but I'm using the skills I learned to be able to vet out partners. Like, okay, this guy's full of crap. Okay, this guy is good. He knows what he's talking about. This is how you talk with investors because I raised capital for my deals. Now I can raise capital for hard money lending, first position loans, second position loans, equity investments in other businesses, in other real estate companies. And that scale of capital and getting people to buy into my vision is now translating into the next iteration that I'm moving into. So
exactly. It's an evolutionary track. You did define exactly what I'm saying. You didn't start with that last piece. Like people start the game saying, I want to be a real estate investor. Okay, cool. How much money do you have? None. Well, probably you're not going to invest money when you have no money. Like, what are you talking about? Well, that's what people that are successful do. Yes, at a later stage in the life, once they have money, and if you want to be in real estate, maybe become an agent, learn the game, right? Like sell a home, build some capital. Oh, build a home, build more capital, invest in a home. Okay, that's a transitionary path. And a lot of times we look at the end and it's like, unless I'm a real estate investor, I don't want to be in real estate. Okay, then you're going to be stuck for a very long time holding your dick in your hand, hoping you're a successful investor. It's going to take you 20 years to maybe get someone to buy in and get some money investing in real estate where you could have done 5 years of work and put yourself at the beginning of the journey and 20 years later be an investor,
Right. Because I mean, the investor side is the ultimate, right? Where you're controlling the capital. And if you want to get into the game with no money, you essentially have to become their employee, right? You're serving the investor.
You're in the industry one way or another.
Because he's giving you the cash to do the deal. So you've got to operate the deal and do all the work.
Because you're doing what? You're trading time, right? You have time, you don't have money. They have money, so they buy your time. And that's a job. And a lot of times, again, because this isn't exciting, right, to work for someone else, people ignore these opportunities because they go, well, I don't want to help that guy build his dream. But you're not. You're making money so you can get to yours, right? They just misunderstand their own opportunity.
So how do people go from being stuck, right? Not moving into, I guess you're calling it circle 2 or circle 3. And how do you get unstuck?
So most people won't move into 3 and most people will never graduate 2. So let's talk about 1 because that's where 90% of population resides for the most part. The number 1 track to evolution is to understand that time moves forward. It never moves back, right? The day you recognize this is the day you recognize that any path, any step forward is better than a stagnant step. So if you don't have a better path than, for example, working at McDonald's, it's better to work at McDonald's than to not work at all. If you have a better path to McDonald's, then build it, work at the next place. A better path than working at a bank. Great, work at a better place. The argument is to move forward. And that's the key that people forget. When I was poor and I had no green card, I had no means of work. Work at the time was $7 an hour, was minimum wage. I used to wash cars for $2 a car, which was an hour and a half for $2, $1 to $2 a car. You would argue, why would you do that when the rate for washing a car was $10 per car? I didn't have a green card. No one was paying me $10 a car. So it doesn't matter what the rate is, what is fair, what is not. Someone was willing to pay me $2 a car. I took $2 because it was better than $0. And what happens though through that process is that by having 10, 15, 20 clients that pay you $2, right? That's not a big deal because you barely made $30, right?
Right.
For a whole day's work. But what it does is it gave you clients. And eventually these people trust you. And they felt so bad for me, they would give me $10 to $15 anyways. Get it? Even though my rate was $2. Doing the $2 car wash gave me a chance to earn the trust to get $10, $15 a car. But what people do is they go, I'm not starting unless I get 10 to 15 a car, right? Like, why would I do that? But the counter to that is not if you have a better opportunity, like you can go work a job. I couldn't at the time. You can, and you can make $10 an hour. That's a better opportunity for you. That opportunity wasn't available for me, like many opportunities are not available for people today. They need to look at opportunity as the ability to try, not what the outcome of that opportunity is. So if they have the ability to try, they can change their future outcome.
I want to pause there because you said something that I think is profound, and it's so simple, right? It's like, oh, well, of course.
It's always simple. Life is always simple.
You want to move forward, but really when you look at people, they only move forward typically when the alternative is so terrible, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I've hit rock bottom. I've got to do something different. I'm going to do something different. And then they change. But the thing is most of us are like, well, it's not that bad. I mean, I'm making $150,000, $200,000 as a contractor. It's not that bad. I can subsist on that. I can make it work. Let me just stay with the safe. Let me stay with the unknown. I don't want to move forward. And even where I'm at now, it's like, I look at things and I look at opportunities and it's like, do I really want to work that hard? Do I want to take on that more risk? Do I want to continue marching forward? And it's easy, it's simple to say, but in actuality, especially when people are comfortable, they're not in a really bad situation. It's hard to stay on track and make forward progress day in, day out, year after year.
It's not that it's hard. It's that the greatest challenge in life is to give up a good life for a great life. But again, where that becomes very difficult is when the needs are met and the wants aren't there. So, and I'll tell you, this is a consciousness issue. People haven't trained their wants enough through their life in any way to want more things as they get them. So what happens is they are basically survivors. And once that survival is met, then they're like, oh, well, I have time. So I'm just going to spend time with my family. I'm going to spend time doing this. And what occurs is they don't realize that each year that they're making the same amount of money or doing the same thing, their value is less than the year before. And I look at humans like an ad on the internet. If you run an ad and it's super successful very early, over time, that ad becomes less and less impactful because more people have seen it, right? Like meaning more people have seen it. It needs to be refreshed, correct? Otherwise, people are like, well, I've seen that. I'm not interested.
Right.
So what happens is there is a diminishing return to human life in its path unless it's constantly evolving. Because time moves forward. If you're doing the same thing, time and the value of time becomes more and more as you get older because you have less of it, right? So when you're 40, you have less time ahead of you than when you're 20 usually. So basically a diminishing return, like your life's getting worse, not better. Like it gets good, but at some point you're like, shit, I wish I was 30 again. You know, like I was doing this and I was having fun. I was moving like this and it's going down, right? So one thing that people don't realize is that time isn't on their side. So they're not in a rush to meet that. And so what occurs is they're not practicing their senses. And I'll tell you what that means. My mom taught me this when I was really young, and I never understood it till I got older. It's a really good lesson in life. When we were really poor, we lived in a very good apartment complex and in the shittiest possible unit. It was a 1-bedroom studio. It wasn't even a bedroom. It was a studio. It was 2 of us. And every home in that area, like every apartment complex there was like 4 bedrooms, super luxury, etc. We had literally the worst it was probably a closet they turned into a studio to rent it. And it was like super expensive compared to everywhere else. We could have had a 2 to 3 bedroom. But my mom insisted we lived in that building. And I couldn't understand why at first, because I was like, why don't I have a bedroom? You know, like, why can't I bring my friends here and go to a room to play? Why do I sleep in the living room? And I realized later that her thing was always be exposed to greatness because you'll see what more looks like. And so I was never satisfied because every time I came out of that apartment to go to school, everyone had a nice car in the garage. We didn't own a car. And every apartment, everyone would come out dressed really nice. And so my expectation of life was that that's a minimum standard. And I'm below that. And I need to raise my standard to that. But if I lived in the hood in a really nice apartment that was just in a bad part, my surrounding would constantly be garbage. And so one thing that my mom taught me at a very young age is experience life for what it can be. So you strive to get back to a place where it normalizes that. So basically, drive a Lamborghini so you know what it's like, so you can eventually get there and own one. Go to the best restaurant and eat a $600 Wagyu steak so you know the difference between incredible Wagyu and Outback Wagyu. You know, like diarrhea food versus incredible food. The difference is in the taste. Once your taste buds have it, you'll find a way to get it back. Once you listen to great music, you'll want to hear great music. Once you see beauty around you, you'll want to be surrounded by beauty. And the argument is that one thing that we miss as human beings is that our senses, the things we have, like great scent. Why is great perfume that triggers you $500 at Saks, but Macy's sells a decent bottle for 40? Right? Like, what does that one do? Why does that smell not smell like the other one? What did they figure out? And what I'm saying is that the best things in life cost a lot of money. And so people will say the best things in life are free. That's bullshit. The best things in life are built around a lot of research and a lot of money. And there's plenty of scams out there that are not. But the majority of things that are of excellent nature are scarce and hard to get and ultimately elevate your senses. Driving a Ferrari elevates your sense over driving a Honda. Driving a Bugatti elevates your sense over driving a Ferrari. You have to be exposed to more to realize what's available in the world. I call myself a poor Persian because I hang around with friends who have like $50 to $80 million yachts. And I get on them and I'm like, dude, what the fuck is this? Like, it costs like 200 grand, like a month to just keep it in operation. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, the guy's building a $30 million house in 6 different states, doesn't give a fuck. And I'm like, that's power, right? I'm like, this guy is leverage. And when I experienced that yacht, I'm like, holy shit, that was fun. Now, I don't like the water that much to buy a yacht, but that experience reminds me that there's levels to the game. And the level is always there above mine, so it pushes me for more. The reason people get stagnant, to answer your question, is because they're not exposed to these levels, because they keep talking about the things that are basically not for them. How many times have I seen a father see my Ferrari or Lamborghini or Aston Martin at a gas station, and the kid runs up and the dad's like, no, don't touch it. That's not ours. Like, don't talk to the guy. Like, this isn't for us. And yet there's some other dads that are like, oh my God, is it okay if we take a photo? Can he be there? And I'm like, yeah, why don't you have him sit in the car, like touch the car, whatever. He's like, are you sure it's okay? And I'm like, so they want their kids to be involved, right? And they normalize that instead of glorify something as stupid as a car. And so that child in the future is going to be excited about owning a Ferrari, and is going to be excited about figuring out that these things aren't unattainable and out of reach, not for them or anything else. And the other dad is basically alienating his child from thinking that there's classes to the world and they're poor and that's not for them. And so as an adult, we get conditioned to remain there. We become less curious. How many people will watch this podcast and say, I don't need a Ferrari. I don't need to learn what PJ is teaching. I don't need a nice watch. I don't need to learn what PJ is teaching. The smart minds will say, let me learn this. I may not want to watch a Ferrari, but let me understand how this works so I don't feel like an idiot and I can participate. Even if I don't want one today, maybe I'll want one in 3 years. Without the knowledge, how do you know what you want or don't want? Without knowing how things work, how do you know if you can reach them or not? But people aren't curious. So curiosity is what's lacking in people who have been stagnant in doing the same thing and basically can't get anywhere.
That is a huge point. And it amazes me the lack of curiosity, right? When I was trying to elevate myself and I was so curious. I'm like, yeah, how did this guy do this? How did he buy 1,000 units? How did he raise capital? How did he get the house and the watch and the Ferrari? And it's not that this is for me or this is exactly what I want, but I'm curious about how do they think? What kind of habits do they have? I mean, what time is he getting up? Is he journaling? What kind of friends does he have? What business models is he using? Not all business models are created equal. And so that curiosity, I see it. It's just like people, they're like, oh, whatever. And they don't even engage. I think they're so far removed of that guy got lucky. That's not for me. I don't want that. Right? You think about, I mean, let's talk about private jet. It's like, I mean, that's a cliche one. And I mean, I look at this stuff. It's like insane how much money it costs to buy one and operate one and on. And you're just like, you know what? I don't need that. I can just fly commercial. But, I got to fly private a couple times and it was like, holy crap. This is so amazing.
Interesting, right? It's exciting. So there's two pieces there. The experience we just talked about, right? You experienced it. So now you're curious about it. And there's two things that happen. You're going to do surface research and say, wow, this is so expensive. It's crazy. Maybe I can't afford to buy a plane. But what's going to happen over time, the more you experience it, the more your mind is not going to say this is expensive, it's out. It's going to stay current with the cost of aviation going down as time goes by, right? And more people flying private, the more people fly private, the cheaper it is, because that's how an industry is born. The larger of an industry around something, the more competitive its pricing. So your mind is going to stay attached to this idea. And as you go, eventually you're going to get closer. So this is the cost you want to get to. This is where you are now. The longer you go, this cost comes down, you go. When you're close enough, here's what's going to happen. Your mind's going to say, how do I hack this small piece difference from where I am to where I want to go? And then you're going to say, well, maybe I share a jet with a friend. Let's both chip in. Now you're suddenly like, well, I can afford it now if we do that, right? So now you're in, right? And the next time you're like, well, now I can afford it because I made even more money and the price is even lower. I'm buying my own jet, right? Like I don't need to share it. But the point is, without the curiosity and the experience, you're not in the game. You're still completely separated from it. So you're never going to see this evolution getting closer, So what's going to happen in your mind is this distance is I'm here and the jet's here. And that's going to be how you grow and how you lower yourself without knowing that this industry is getting like this. That's what happens to people who have given up on their dreams of owning a nice car, a nice watch, because in their head, they're like, the car's 300 grand. I make 100K a year. This isn't together,
Yeah. And it's sort of like you start asking, how might I do that, right? What else would I have to do to make that happen instead of just dismissing it as this is impossible? And I mean,
or it's a scam, or it doesn't work because I don't understand it, right? How many times are we like, for example, like when Bitcoin came out, everybody's like, it's a scam. I'm like, it's not for me, but I understood what people were doing. Does that make sense? I was like, I'm not interested in it at the time. And people were said, well, there's money to be made. There's money to be made in everything. The argument wasn't, is it real money? Would it happen? Is it a scam? The point is, I understood it. It wasn't for me. And secondly, it wasn't just not understanding and not being for me. It was also the idea that I said, it's not for me now. So at this stage, it's not worth my focus point. But it doesn't mean I didn't investigate it, understand it, or see what's happening, or believe no one could ever make $1 in it. I said, it's too risky for me now. I'm not interested. Yes, you can always look back and say, well, if you would have put $100, you would have made $10 million. Okay, I believe that. I'm sure in any investment, you can look at the past and say, if you would have put $100 in Apple stock, you would have made it, right? And that's just not how this works. Like you can't look back at investments and be like, well, did I go wrong? No, you never miss the shots you don't take, right? And that's the key.
And I there's a lot of people out there, they own a couple rental homes and they see the purchase price of an apartment complex and the down payment and they stop right there. They're just like, that's too much. I can't do it. Instead of looking at like, well, how could I? Like, if I can't qualify for the loan, can I get somebody on my team that can? If I can't get the down payment, are there other people that would want to pitch in cash to help me buy this thing, right? Maybe I can't buy this apartment complex on my own right now, but if I do this over the next 10 years, maybe I will be able to do that. And it's just getting curious on how. Now, talk about purpose though and fulfillment, right? Because there's always another level. There's always another thing to chase. There's always somebody richer or something that you can't afford. Maybe you get the jet, but now you can't afford the island or you can't afford the yacht or whatever. Like, how do you balance that? That's something that I've struggled with.
How about instead of we talk about purpose, which is a very broad word. Remember, I like language and definitions in a much better way. Purpose is a very large word that's very scary for people. When you say purpose, they say, that means it was given to me. It was my destiny. It's something larger I have to do. I have to change the world. Like, what is it that I'm doing? Why don't we talk about being purposeful, which is the entry point of finding purpose?
Okay.
A person being purposeful is an individual who accepts their purpose and any given moment in the act they have been given. So for example, my purpose for the moment is to do a podcast with you. How good of a job can I do on that, right? My purpose in my business is to grow revenue or to this. How purposeful can I get in that? My purpose in a job is maybe to be a banker. How good of a banker or great of a banker can I be? Because that is my chosen destination in terms of how I'm spending my time. If I cannot find or be purposeful in a job, I will never be able to choose what I want to be purposeful at in the future and commit to it. And this is the argument of finding what you consider your larger, great life purpose. It starts with the act and the character of a purposeful human who then goes to the next stage of his evolution and says, I have always been purposeful in my act, and I now choose what that act is for the future, and I want to commit to it. Therefore, my purpose is born. So the problem with people is that, again, they're seeking the final destination before they're doing the work ahead. And so they're staying disconnected from this huge word again. Remember, like purpose is here. We are here. So big, but if I'm purposeful and I'm bridging the gap, that day when I choose that I want to cure cancer, right? I know the characteristics of what I need to do to be able to do that. And if I'm indeed going to follow that and commit to it as my life purpose, or I'm not, regardless of how big of a purpose that may seem so at the time.
There's a verse in Proverbs that I think sums up what you said. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might, right? It's like whatever you're working on right now, Absolutely. Do that to the best of your abilities and make progress.
Because you've chosen to use your time that way at that moment, right?
Gotcha.
And that's the key.
Well, hey, PJ, I really, really enjoyed chatting with you. We're coming up on an hour here, but if people want to read the books, where would you recommend they start? Third Circle Theory?
Yeah, Third Circle Theory is the first book, Radius second, Gated Choice the third. The easiest way to find me is just go to learnfrompj.com. All my books, courses, anything I teach on the internet's there. And you can clearly kind of follow me on social media through that very same site as well. Super simple site, learnfrompj.com.
So if you're interested in getting an exotic car, getting into, exotic watches, if you want to read more about the human consciousness and, continuing that progress.
If you're curious about it, not even interested, then take that step forward.
Gotcha. And that's what happened to me. I saw the ad. I was curious. I went to the website. I bought the course. I watched the videos. Then I was more curious and I was like, okay, let me engage the consultant, see how this all works. And, it materialized. So
absolutely. 100%. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you.
All right, PJ. Well, appreciate you guys. And if you're out there listening, hit up PJ, learnfrompj.com and take some time this week to unlock your life. Thank you.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.